Beth and Janai.
In researching our country, Uzbekistan, we found many similarities and differences between their culture and ours. Like us, the Uzbek citizens are very literate. 99.3% of all people over the age of 15 can read and write. They also have a high value on family and community, as we do as well. Both men and women can vote. However, there are some differences. The biggest one being that Uzbek citizens do not enjoy freedom of speech like we do in this country. How many of you have ever been to a government protest? You've gone and protested something they didn't like from the government. How many of you were shot at by the government you were protesting? Therein lies the largest difference. Today we are going to tell you about Uzbekistan's history and their government, their current public speakers, social and cultural parameters, and education for public speaking. Janai is going to open by telling you about Uzbekistan's history and government. And this is just a picture of where Uzbekistan is.
Okay. Uzbekistan is part of the former Soviet Union, and they gained their independence on September 1st, 1991. They were influenced by dictators Lenin, Stalin, and Gorbachev. World history books stated Stalin sought to control the hearts and the minds of the Soviet citizens. He tried to do this by tirelessly distributing propaganda, censoring opposing sides, imposing Russian culture on minorities, and replacing religion with communist ideology. Like Gorbachev in Russia, President Karimov, he was a communist leader, and he ran 3 consecutive terms before becoming the only president that has been in Uzbekistan since 1991. But Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan's government stated that constitution was adopted in 1992 provides for strong presidency with power to appoint government and dissolve legislature, and practice authoritarian state with all power in executive and suppression of dissent. The World Factbook monitors said that this Uzbekistan monitors anything live going out in Uzbekistan. They can't air news live like we do here. They can't. Everything has to be gone through a certain process. Like the government has to approve everything that goes out. Now Beth will tell you about public speaking in Uzbekistan.
As Janai said, President Karimov has been Uzbekistan's only president since its becoming a nation in 1991. He's run 3 consecutive terms that have kept him in office for about 20 years. I have a speech of him speaking that I would like to show you, and we can kind of compare some similarities and differences in what our public speaking is like. Hang on just a second. I can hear it, but I can't see it.
Go to the one that shows the globe. That one.
Okay.
Yani bir vaqtlar Tojikistonni Amudaryo tepasida Ragun degan bir katta
You can turn it up.
stansiyasini, stansiyasini qurilish haqida bilasiz. Uni kuchi 3,600,000 megawatt tashkil qiladi. Va eng muhimi shuki, uni munosib platinasi 350 metr. Sayana Shushinskiy degan Sibirda bo'lgan fojiani eshitgansiz. 75 ta odam shu fojiadan halok bo'lgan. Eng muhimi shuki, Sayana Shushinskiyni loyihasini qurgan gidroproyekt Ragunni proyektini
I think you guys should probably get
Yani
that picture at
egasi
this
bit-
point.
40 yil oldin Sovet davrida hech kim uni tekshirmasdan bu loyihani qilgan. Endi
As you can see from his speech, you notice that he spoke very comfortably to everybody. He stood there very comfortably, his posture was good, he did a lot of hand gestures. His tone was even and clear. Obviously we couldn't understand what he was saying, but the people he was speaking to could. He also did, like I said, a lot of gesturing, and his tone was almost a monotone with little to no inflection, which I think is one of the bigger differences between our speaking and their speaking, is his tone was really consistent. There was no change in tone, no change in volume. It was just very monotonous. President Karimov is probably one of the only people in Uzbekistan who's free to say whatever it is they'd like to say. In May of 2005, in the city of Andijan, there was a massacre that I alluded to in the opening. Basically, there was a group of protesters who went out and protested 22 businessmen being wrongly imprisoned. Other reports have said they protested for better education, food, schooling, things along those lines. But basically what ended up happening is the government was called in and opened fire on people. I have some pictures. This is the disclaimer. It's not horrid, but some people might take offense. The government claims that 188 people died that day. Some other estimates put it at over 750. Uzbekistan's Forgotten Uprising had this to say about the Andijan massacre. The Uzbek government successfully effected a blackout that put a virtual freeze on information coming into or going out of the landlocked Central Asian nation. There is no inspirational clip of an Uzbek man standing in the path of a tank because there are no video clips or pictures, just a long list of the dead and missing. I also have another video I'd like to show you a little bit about the massacre itself and what a reporter had to do to go in to get just to be able to. Can you turn it off for me?
Protest their innocence. A group of their armed supporters then took over a government building. The army soon arrived. A shootout took place between the two sides. After a phone conversation with the Uzbek Interior Minister, the militants decided to leave the building and headed outside. At this point, the leader of the rebels, Sharif Shakirov, talked to the BBC's Uzbek service on his mobile phone as he walked towards the main square. These were his last words. Sharif Shakirov was one of the 186 that the government confirmed died that afternoon. Opposition groups claim the number is closer to 750. Today, Andijan is sealed. No independent journalists are allowed in. We traveled to neighboring Kyrgyzstan. We smuggled ourselves into Uzbekistan using an unofficial local route. Over there is Uzbekistan. Where we are now is Kyrgyzstan. This is a very tiny little border which is only known to the local residents. The border is a simple plank of wood over a dried up stream. Once inside the country, we had to change cars 3 times and took several hidden routes through people's back gardens to get to the closed city of Venditti. Today, all appears quiet, but the city is full of fear. Uzbek KGB and police have been all over Andijan looking for rebels and any outsiders. Journalists are not welcome. Our cameraman had to improvise to allow us to film on the streets without being spotted. In the main square, we saw the government's efforts to clean up the scene of summer killing. This used to be the cinema, and it was here, among the locals, that much of the killings happened as people sitting in huge were shot at by government troops. But the governments haven't managed to clean up everywhere. Apparently, people were trying to escape the main big avenue, down this road, to the tiny little streets trying to find refuge. Witnesses say they were met by government soldiers. You can clearly see the signs of the gunshots all over the walls. We met many people in Andijan who were too frightened to speak. They all told us that the demonstration on May 13th began peacefully. This couple's 21-year-old son, Beth, had been at the start of the demonstration. He came back to tell his mother about it, and then he went back. The next day, they found his body in the morgue. They took his body home with a number tag from the morgue attached to his stove. The numbers on the tag would have given us an idea of the numbers killed that day. But a few days after Heisek's death, the authorities came around and demanded the tag back, something they did with all the bodies of those killed that day. Andijan is now a city of the missing. Some disappeared on the day. Others were arrested later in a government sweep. Some believe their relatives are here at the prison. They come every day to try and find out if their loved ones are inside. Some have been looking for weeks, like this man. He has heard nothing of his son's whereabouts since the 13th.
Mor komadı, başka komadı, hem yıldızlar çıkıştı topşanma. Lekin odamlarni gap bo'yicha tirikda berishganmiz, shunda tiriganda yuribmiz xolos biz. Hech qanaqa nimamiz yo'q.
Those not in the prison may be here. We found this mass grave on the outskirts of the town. The graves have been hastily dug. No names, only numbers. We could not confirm why. The undertaker went missing the day after these graves were dug. This is the first time these graves have been filmed.
This appeared probably all at the same time. They all look fresh and recently digged. So we can only guess who's buried there.
Many fled following the violence to neighboring Kyrgyzstan. Fatima and Sibilo are left with 13 grandchildren to look after.
So, as you can see, after this occurred, they've really gone into, just like Janai said, there's a media lockdown. Nobody's allowed in or out of the city. No reports are supposed to be allowed in or out. If this reporter had been caught, I could imagine what would have happened to her. I spoke to the consular in Seattle, Gary Furlong. He's the consular for Uzbekistan. And I emailed him over the course of probably a week and a half, and it took a lot of questioning for him to answer me whether or not they had the right to speak. He kept going around, he kept circumventing the question, and then he finally did answer, and he said that it's that they don't that the people's personal rights are a bit more tricky because they're still working to overcome the repression of the Soviet Union. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about this gentleman. His name is Sanjar Umarov. He's a businessman in Uzbekistan and as well as an American citizen. He married an American woman and they actually have a home in Tennessee. He was arrested in 2005 shortly after the Androgen massacre for speaking out against that, as well as a prison break and some other government things he didn't like public speaking, human rights, things along those lines. He was held in solitary confinement and he was tortured 11 or 12 times in his 4 years in prison. He was granted amnesty in 2009 and currently resides with his wife again in Tennessee. The New York Times had this to say about him. Mr. Umarov's story, no matter its happy ending for him and his family, is a tale of the perils of activism in the post-Soviet world. In 2005, he spoke against the crackdown after a prison break and public demonstration in Androgen. Well, now that we've told you a little bit about Uzbekistan's history and their government and their current public speakers, Janai is going to tell you about some social and cultural parameters.
As Beth said, she interviewed Gary Furlong, and he stated both men and women are able to vote. And one person can vote for each family as long as they have their passport. So I could vote for me and like my mom, if I had a passport, I could just take it up there and give them their ballot. A lot of people are getting creative about how they're doing it. They're starting to write their complaints on their ballots because they can't really speak upon like they're in public about how they really feel. They have banned public meetings, demonstrations, and religious groups. People who do these, they get arrested even though they shouldn't, and there's no speaking out against the government at all. Gary Furlong stated there are more cohesive as family units may be how we were in the 30s, and much for the same reason, and they are quite community-centered. Men and women are largely in equal footing, particularly in the larger cities, not so much in rural areas. Waldmark Encyclopedia said, children are typically taught that openly confronting adults is wrong and that they should be quiet and stay composed even if they're upset and angry with their elders. Dignity is